Hello, and welcome to our Alchemy coffee break. Today's topic will be translating databases with Alchemy Catalyst. Translating databases with Catalyst gives you three main advantages. The first one is that you have direct database access, meaning you don't need to export or import files in order to translate the content of your database. The second advantage is that Catalyst offers a very flexible approach. Because we use SQL as a querying language for the database we are translating, we can find content anywhere and we can place the content where it has to be immediately. And finally, this is a very scalable model because Catalyst is able to talk to any type of database, going from Access to Oracle server or MySQL server or MS SQL server. So I think the best way to show you this is to give you a quick demo. And just to give you a bit of context, this is the database we're going to translate. This is a MySQL database hosted on one of our servers here on the network. And basically the database is called test, and the table we're going to translate is called text table. If I open the table, this is what I see. I have an ID for each of the strings. I have the text in English, French, Spanish, and I could have as many languages as required, obviously. Now, for our sample, we will translate this text in French. Well, we'll pseudo-translate it, and we will populate the translation into the French column. So, how do we do that? First, let's close the connection here, and let's switch on to Catalyst. There we go. The first step, obviously, is to establish a connection between Catalyst and the database. To do that, we go into Tools, Data Source, Define. So we can define the data source. We can create a UDL file. If we have a UDL file, we can use it. Otherwise, we can use a connection string that we will build now. Because I'm using MySQL, I need to use the ODB provider for ODBC. So I have a MySQL ODBC driver, and I have previously set it up in the control panel in the ODBC data sources. Now that this is done, I will use the provider for ODBC drivers. On the connection tab, I will select the data source I've created. So this is, a little local connection that points to my MySQL server using the correct ODBC driver. Once I've pointed to the right data source name, I can simply select the catalog, which is the database I want to use. Click on Test Connection to make sure everything works fine, and then, as it's okay, click on OK and here. This opens the database rules window, which will allow me to select items from my database, put them into a result set, and then use that result set to create my TTK. To do that, first I need to have a look at the content of my database. Now here it's quite simple. I have one table and I have a few columns. So what I want to do is I might decide to select all the columns, or use star, from my table. Now here it is a very simple SQL statement, but in specific cases I may, by using very more complex SQL statement, I'm able to reach strings and translation content found a little bit everywhere in the database. This has basically created a result set, and the result set contains a certain number of columns. These will be used in order to create my TTK. And here is the logical representation of my TTK. The first thing I want to bring is an ID. So I will drag the ID over localization object, and when I drop it, it will ask me, what is this? Is this going to be the source text, or it could be an ID, or maybe it was a mistake, so we can cancel this. But in this case, it's an ID. Then what we want is the source text linked to that ID. So we will take the English column and drop it on top of the source item. And this has now used the English column as our source item. Finally, because we want to put the translation in the French column, we will drag the French column on top of the source, drop it, and use the new translation option. Now this has created a mapping saying that for every ID, we will take a source item, which is be found in the ENUS column for that specific ID, and we will put a translation into the French column of the relevant record. If I now click Save, I'm creating a DDF file, which is a data definition file. So let's call it MySQL demo. QL demo, there we go. And we can now connect to the database by inserting the DDF file in a TTK. First thing obviously will be to create a new TTK. We go from English to French and we right click and select the relevant DDF file. There we go. Click on open and Catalyst will read the content of the DDF file out of database into our TTK. If we click on the result set, we will see the content that we saw earlier in the MySQL client. At this stage, the TTK can be used independently of the database, can be sent out for translation, obviously can be analyzed, leveraged and validated when it comes back. For the sample of this demonstration, we'll simply pseudo-translate it so that, you know, it is different. The translation is different to the source. There we go. So this is really my translated TTK delivered by the translation company, and I'm ready to update my database content once I've validated and done all that post-translation work. So all I need to do really is right-click on the DDF file and select Extract File. Catalyst will warn me because I'm about to update what is essentially a source format. So, you know, we've taken the strings from there and we're going to update that repository file area. So we need a warning. And once I say OK, Catalyst starts and updates the database. Once the database is complete, there we have now, we have completed our translation of our database. Now let's have a look at the database itself to make sure that it is actually being translated. So let's open the test database. We have the test DB, and here we have the table. And you can see now that the French column has been populated with the content, the translated content of the TTK. And so this is basically the conclusion of our little demonstration. Just as a summary, Catalyst is very useful for translating database because you have direct database access. You don't need to export files and re-import them afterwards. It's a very flexible approach in the sense that you can find translation content across tables, across columns, across rows, depending on the schema of your database. And it's also a very scalable model because it applies quite transparently to any type of database, whether it's Access, Oracle, MS SQL, MySQL, or any other type of database. If you have any questions on what you've seen today, please don't hesitate to contact us at info@alchemysoftware.ie. In the meantime, thank you very much for taking the time and have a good day. Bye bye.